Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our session, which is the Librarian series which we are working on. And we have already covered various steps where we will be creating the book request and the requester or the submitter, right? The student, he will be submitting that particular request, right? So, previously, we have already created two sessions for this particular series, and this is our third session. And let's get started. So what we have created till now is we have created a form where uh, we have that particular book request form. So the student will come and the librarian will be submitting that form in behalf of that student. Right. So let's go back to our form which we have created. We have created this form, book request form, requester name, form date, to date, and books. So what we have done till now, we have saved the record of particular book, right? So I have already created this table TL book record. Inside this table, I have already inserted all these details, right? So these details are the book details, right? Whatever book is available in the library, right? So I'll go back to my particular form and let's create some rule which will be helpful to fetch this particular data. And then we will be selecting that particular book's name from that particular field, which is this field, right? So let's create a rule. And before creating a rule, let's create a constant for that data store entity, right? So let's check if we have the constant or not. And I'll filter this particular application with this. Okay, I'm not having any kind of constant. So I'll create a constant, tl ds books record entity, right? So the description is, and we have the constant type data store entity, and I'll select tl data store entity is this book record. So I'll create this constant. Right now I'm having two constant. One is for the book record entity and the other is for the student record. So let's see if, okay, so this is my main request table, which is empty right now. And this is my student record. Let's create the constant for this one also. So it will be helpful to write the data while writing it into the data store entity. So I'll create one more constant, which will be the ds main book request constant. So book request table points to TL book request main book request. So this is my constant for this particular entity, and I'll select data store entity again. My data store is TL data store, and the entity is right now main book request. So my work is complete here. And now I have all the constant or the three constant for all these entities. So what I'll do now, I'll create an expression rule. Inside this expression rule, I'll write fetch. And what I need to fetch? I need to fetch the book record. So I'll write TL fetch book details to fetch the book. I'll save this inside the TL rules and constant. I'll create this. Now I have already created a constant, so I can use a bank query entity to fetch that particular data. So I'll directly jump on this particular feature, query editor. I'll go inside data store entity. I'll select my TL book request table. No, we want this one, book record entity, books record entity. And this is the preview of my data. I'll click continue. I'll generate the query. And if I touch this, I'm getting everything. So this is my data, which is having all the entries related to all the books. So I'm getting all the data. I'll save this. And it's a similar thing which we have done for this particular requester name. If you remember, we have created a picker custom picker field for this one. For this requester name, the similar thing we can do for books. Or let's go inside design and let's see what we are having other options for this particular feature. We can also choose drop down, right? And let's try to use drop down now. So what I'll do now, I'll use drop down instead of using this particular books, right? So all the books list will be available inside this drop down. So I'll directly go inside expression mode. I'll scroll down and I'll rename this to books. I'll remove this text field. Let's comment it out first. And this is my books, or what I can write, select books. So this is a drop down. Let's see if we can do a multi-select inside this. So let's search label position, instruction required, disable choice labels, values, required message helped. Okay, so I guess we cannot use multiple feature here. So let's see if we are having any other multiple drop down. Right, so we can select multiple books inside this drop down. So let's try to use this, right? Because in this drop down, we can only select a single option, right? But in this particular multiple drop down, what we can do, we can select the multiple books, right? And we will go inside expression mode again. So I am just thinking about how we can store these particular data inside the database, because if we are storing the single books, then if it means if we use this particular drop down, which in which we can only select a single drop down, then we need to raise a request for every book again and again, right? But if we select a multiple drop down, then we can select all the books whichever is like taken by the student, and we can submit this form that will write the data with multiple books, right? So let's see what we can do. And where is my multiple drop down? So it's look similar actually with drop down itself. And let's see, right now these are the by default options which are available by looking into this, right? So I don't want to use this particular options. What I will do, I will create a local variables. I'll create a local variable, local bank books data. So what I will do, I'll fetch all the books data and I'll store that data inside this particular local variable. So which rule I can use? I can use rule bank, which I've just created for fetching the books detail. TA is my application prefix, not TA, TL underscore fetch books detail. So it will return me all the details. We can also see that value. If I go inside my right hand side panel and I can see this books data. Inside this books data, I'm getting all the details related to every books. So we have this 11 data items, and I got the data. What I need to do, I need to populate that data inside this particular multiple drop down, right? So let's see how I can do that. And let's remove all these things and also comment or remove this single select drop down. I'll remove this field also, and I'll rename this to select books. Before fetching the books label, what we can do, we can create a label for, or sorry, local variable for the labels. So I'll write books label, and let's only fetch data by using index. inside the first local variable, and in the second local variable, I'll only fetch the books label. So what I need to use here inside this index, books data, and let's see the value of that particular label. So we have book name, I guess. If I go inside maths, book name is my required field. So what I'll go inside this particular index and I'll write book name, and I'll complete this index and I'll put this comma. So after using this, I can see this local variable is having the data, and this local variable books label is having nothing. So let's try to test this again. And if I test this, then you can see inside the books label, I'm getting all the labels. Right now there are 10 or 11 number of books. So all the data is coming. I'll go back to my drop down menu, drop down field. I'll remove all these dummy options. I'll use my local variable, which is books label inside choice labels. And inside choice values, what I can do, I can use identifiers, right? So either I can use identifier, or either I can use the particular, if I go inside this data, books data, then we have book ID, right? So if I open this first element, then we have this book ID. Either I can use this book ID or I can use the identifier. So the best option is to use the identifier. So what I can do, we need to change something actually, because we have already used this index, and due to using this index data, we cannot access identifier now. So what I can do, I can remove this index from here and I'll cut this. Right now it will return everything, means the data subset. Now I'll use that index inside this. So it will return me the same thing, right? We can also test this. This will return me the data subset, books data. And from this books data, first of all, I'll get this data, right? And after getting the data, I'll get the book name. So this particular error is coming due to the multiple drop down field. So I'll test this again. Let's see if the data is correct or not. So inside the book data, I'm getting the data subset with the identifiers. So these are the identifiers. Now what I can do, I can create one more local variable, which is the books identifier. Local bank books identifiers. And what I can do now, I can access the identifier using index with that particular local variable books data. And inside this, I can pass identifiers. Now I'll close this index and let's test this. So I'm getting the books identifier. Okay, everything is fine now. I can go back to my dropdown and I'll remove this array, dummy array. And what I can use here now, local bank books identifier. Right, so let's see how this is working. And this is my form, and inside this select books, I'm having the list of all the books. So I can select any of the Hindi, moral, and cultural book, right? Then it will save the data inside this student data. So what I can do here, because this is a multiple select drop down, right? And this student data is not an array right now. Let's see if this is an array, not this one, this book request. Because finally, what we need to do, we need to store everything inside this book request. So let's see this book request. This is not an array. And what I can do, I can either create this as an array. Let's test something, and let's see what is happening right now. So if I go inside my multiple drop down, and let's try to save this inside RI bank book request dot book ID, and let's also give the value RI bank book request dot book ID. So I have put this book ID inside this value and inside the save into. So if I select English and if I click outside, then I can see my data is getting populated. My book ID is getting populated, right? And if I select one more book, for example, maths, and now I click outside, then nothing is happening. If I click Hindi, then nothing is happening. It's because this is not an array, right? So let's try to make this as an array. And if I click this as an array, now this is some issue. Let's test this. Test this interface again, and cannot index property student ID of type text into null values of the type TL mail request, right? This error is coming because inside this value we have this RA bank book request dot book ID. But this is an array, right? When they are not able to index this particular book request. So what we can do here in this situation is, so in this scenario, actually, we cannot make this book request as an array. That's why the error is coming, because the configuration which we have done previously, if you remember, for requester name also, we are running this particular loop, right, for the search selected labels, right? And here we are using book request dot student ID. So if we use this as a multiple, then this will give the issue, right? And the null is going inside this. That's why the issue was coming. And in the from date also, in the to date also, we are using dot to date and dot from date, right? So this issue will come in this form and to as well. So it's just useless if we create this book request as a multiple, right? For just as for multiple books. So what we can do, we can change this particular from multiple to a single drop down. So what it will help us, it will just help us to like work with the current functionality. And for every requester, right, whatever books we are selecting, we will be storing that particular book request variable as a single variable. We will not write that as a multiple variable, right? For different books, we can like submit this form, right? This form is not a big form, right? So for whatever books we are the student is requesting, we can submit this form, because this is just a small form where the requester name is there and from date and to date and the books. So what I can do, instead of using this multiple field, because this will always give error, so I can directly use a single one. I can directly use this drop down, and now I can use book, select book. So now let's see what is this error as an invalid value of value. So inside value, we have a book ID. So let's try to test this. Okay, so value cannot be null. Okay, so this is a drop down and this is value is coming as a null. So what we need to do, we need to use a placeholder. And we'll use a placeholder which is select the book. So this is my placeholder and the error will be gone now. So now my form is ready and we have the requester name. First, I'll select the name here. For example, this name, and I'll select from date 14th and to date 22nd. And the book, every book is coming, I can select maths. So whatever I'm selecting here, it will get stored inside this particular book. So this is my book ID. This is my student ID. This is my from date and this is my to date, because these two are the foreign keys. And this request ID will be generated automatically and created by and created on. So what we need to configure now, this submit button. So what I can do, let's see what we are having inside the submit button. They're not having any kind of save into. So I'll use a save into. And because whenever I'm submitting this particular form, then what I need to store, I need to use a bank save, and inside a bank save, I'll use RA bank book request dot created by. Inside created by, what I can do, I can put logged in user, right? And similar thing which I'll do for the created on also. Control C, copy paste, and I'll change this to created on and this logged in user to current time. And this is my current time. This function will return the current time. Right. So whenever I'll click on this particular submit button, then I'm getting the created by and created on. And inside this cancel, for submit button, there is no value. Right. So I can also use value function here. So I'll put the value submit. Right. And I'll change the value for this cancel button. I'll change this to cancel. And let's see if we are having any kind of, okay, we have rule input called cancel. So I'll store this inside the cancel. When I submit this, cancel is still none. When I cancel it, inside the cancel, we have false. Okay, we are having false inside cancel because this is a boolean, I guess. So what we need to do, we need to change this boolean as a text. So we can store cancel string inside this particular variable. Now if I click inside cancel, then this is coming as a cancel. Right, so my form is ready. I'll save this form and let's add one more step in my process because right now my form is ready. So what we need to do, whenever the user will come or the student will come to the librarian, and the librarian will submit this particular form on behalf of the student, right? So right now let's create a process model. It's time to create a process model for this flow to write this particular data inside the database. And in which table we need to write it? Because in the student record, we have student details. In the books record, we have books details. And we need to write inside main request form. So I'll create a process model here. And write book request, right? Or what I can also write book request main process model. Or let's only create this write functionality, and then we can add main if we want another process model later on. So right now, let's only create TL write book request, and I'll give the description to write the data inside book request table. I'll create this. I'll give the security which is already selected. I'll click on save. So this is the first process model which we are creating right now, and we have right now 20 total objects. If I click on this hierarchical view, then I can see all the objects in hierarchy. If I click on the flat view, then we have all the objects here. So my process model is this process model, which is an empty process model right now. And my requirement is to write that particular form, right? And I'll use a user input task. I'll attach it at the very beginning. I'll rename this to book request form. I'll click outside. I'll search for write to data store entity. I'll rename this to write book request. And I'll open this. I'll select my form, which is my TL main book request form. I'll click OK. Yes. I wanted to create node inputs. I have the cancel and book request. I'll go inside data. I have this book request. So this is a place from where I'm creating the process variable. I'll click on this button. I'll click OK. For cancel also, I'll create a process variable. Click OK. So this is done and done. Everything is done. The assignment is not done. So what I can do, I can directly, right now, there is no process flow. There is no assignees. We are just trying, and we are just trying to create a flow to write that particular data inside database. So what I can do, I can select process initiator. Later on, we can change this to some other assignees. So right now I can select process initiator and I'll remove this check because every time this task will be assigned, it will notify me. I don't want to get that email. So I'll remove this check button. Assignment is done. My form is selected. The node inputs are there and everything is mapped with the process variables. Right. So let's see inside the general, we have book request form. And for the task display name, let's make this name as a dynamic name and I'll put and we have this process variable. So what I'll attach a request ID. And let's configure this write to data store entity. So in which entity I need to write it? I need to write it in book request entity. I've already created the constant for that. I'll create cons bank TL and book request table. Right. So my data store entity is selected. I'll create a new input. I'll rename this to book request. I'll select the type TL book main book request. I'll select the value book request. And then in the output also, I need to store the values inside book request. So I can get the book request ID. I'll click OK. So I have this simple form right now. And what I also need a XOR to configure the cancel functionality of that form. I'll attach this to AND. I'll end this particular node to terminate process. Okay. Now this termination is configured. Inside the decision, I'll add a new condition. I'll go inside if loop. I'll use if condition if, or I can directly use PV bank cancel is equal to cancel. If PV bank is equal to cancel is true, then it will go to the end node. Otherwise, it will write the book request. Okay. I'll change this path label to cancel as a no and yes. So everything is configured. We have our start and end process ready. I'll save and publish this. I'll try to debug this now. And what I need to do, I need to go inside file and then start process for debugging. So I will click on this start process for debugging and let's see how we can debug this. This is my particular form and my process is initiated and I can see this form. Now I need to fill this particular form details. So the requester name, I'll select A because I'm already having two details. I'll select my name. I'll select form date as today and to date as tomorrow. And inside the book, I'll select socials. And I'll submit this. I'll refresh my process instance and everything is completed. So let's see the database also. If we have the data inside book main book request or not, I'll refresh this and I'm having the detail of the book request. This is my request ID 1. This is my book ID, which is socials. This is my student ID, which is my name. And I'm having all the details created by and created all. On is also coming proper. So this is how we can create a process to write that particular book request inside the database. So our first step is done. I have the form, I have the process model to write this data inside database. And let's also check the monitoring view. And if I go inside monitoring and in the process activity, I can see this was my process instance, which was initiated, right? And whenever there is any kind of error, we can go inside this particular monitoring and we can see the error. Right now, there is no error. My process is successful. That's why this green icon is coming. Right. So this is how we can create, we can write that particular data inside database. And this comes to an end for this particular third series. And we will cover the next steps in our next videos. Okay. So till then, goodbye. Practice a lot. And for any queries, please do comment and email me. I have already given all the email and contact details in the description box, so you can check and reach out to me if in case of any queries. Thanks a lot. See you in next video. Bye bye.